So essentially the first part of this is going to be basically just going over the changes that we were discussing internally to just kind of rework the roadmap for the 11th time, I know. So I'll jump right into this. So our thought process is that we're going to finish up the remaining aspects of 1.2. That means the mass entity. That means the bloody civilian vote evacuations. It's going to be the civilian hold and all of that stuff being repurposed and cleaned up so it works better cohesively with all the other systems. And then going into 1.3, we're going to focus exclusively on bugs, crashes, and performance because it's become kind of unwieldy how bad it is in terms of basically some situations, some hardware configurations, how poorly the game plays, and it needs to improve. Previously, the plan was to do factions, but with our limited manpower and just generally we want to just make the gameplay better for all the content we have already, solidify it, make it a bugless experience. Our compromise for basically delaying factions yet again would be, as we said previously, when the game was less buggy, better performance, and was just refined, that we were going to basically go and do co-op. So 1.3 will be basically doing that and then doing the co-op. And then after 1.3, we'll go back to what 1.3 used to be, which is basically now 1.4, which would be factions. That also will give our level designers and our modelers more time to work on San Francisco North and to work on just generally the modeling components of the factions because we don't want to rush them. And even with not having this delay, it was going to take months longer to properly get our blockouts of all the faction vehicles to completion, whether it be for Pierce, Natalie, and Fenrir. So this also gives us more time because then it's a programmer-centric task. Fix the game, make it less buggy, improve the performance, quality of life changes, and then co-op. Both programmer-centric tasks. While all that's going on, in the back end, our modelers will still keep building up a queue of faction vehicles, making sure all the faction units are adequate, making sure they're optimized, so that way when we return after co-op is implemented, it'll be a 1-2 punch in terms of just rapid succession of okay, now let's jump to factions. Now 1.3 is, I'm saying cleanup, I'm saying bug reports and all this other stuff, but it also means taking systems that have been relegated to being poorly maintained or poorly implemented and just finishing them. So the UI, facelift, done. Stop changing it. The doctrine tree, it's in there. It's good. Whatever vehicles we're putting in that have been on the back burner that have been modeled. So we're going to look at the doctrine tree. We're going to look at the DNA research tree, and we're going to stop putting that off. So the DNA points are going to actually have a progression path towards Chelsea of killing her, killing lieutenants, and improving your guys' resistance towards the infection. So these are all core systems that we've kind of neglected in favor of civilians, factions, and it's we need to fix what we already have, solidify our core, and then move on to factions. And we'll co-op and then factions. So the short list that I have for you guys here today, let me open up Trello, would be building and placing structures are finicky, crappy. We need to do some serious work on what goes into placing structures in the world, giving better contextual options or actions back to the audience, the player, of why you can't place certain things, and improve the logic so that it's easier to place buildings and place structures in the cities. That's one of the core systems that we're including. It's the doctrine system, like I mentioned before. Move some things around, add a couple of things. I'll give you an example. We have Little Bird guns modeled. We have Black Hawk weapons modeled. We need to add those. Make them as modules, add them onto the doctrine tree. That's done. Make some slight changes to the doctrine tree that we've had planned that we haven't been able to implement because we've been putting it off. UI reskin. Improve the infected attacking and defense logic, because you figure they're kind of moronic at times in terms of how effective they are in terms of breaking up into teams and just attacking you more efficiently. So that's on our core list. That'll include lieutenants, that'll include Chelsea, and that'll include the standard infected and the bigger enemy types. We just need to kind of improve their AI. I had it on the list for improving the clutter system. I'm working on that right now. That should be done today, or pretty close to being done. There will probably be some outliner assets that I missed because there's literally like 30, 40,000 actors in our outliner, but I'm trying to run through every grid and convert them with a new tool that I wrote that will allow you guys to remove more miscellaneous clutter from the world so you can build in more locations. You can take control of these locations and make them your own. Um, Walls being too fragile. That was on our list of a core system that has to be improved. There's a GIF in our announcements channel that shows the progress that we've made on just kind of solidifying that and making it more improved. So it's like it actually can take a beating from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. They've seen as much as a 60 to like 75% enhancement in terms of durability. Um, Basically giving some of the CERC structures more purpose and gameplay because you figure there are structures that you build that just don't do anything. They're deprecated. They're not like the medic should be built off of the medical wing instead of the barracks, as a change we did. Um, Removing the command tree system. We removed the stages, and we basically made it more freeform. So if you want to go in the vehicle sooner, you can. And basically, we just inflated the cost a little bit to adjust for early game vehicles. Um, so those are changes that are coming out either tonight or tomorrow. We removed the build radiuses for the command tents, so that when you have the little hover, you drive it around, and you capture a zone, that circle is gone. You can build your garrison tents anywhere in the province that you just took over, and you can essentially now place MO tents. And the MO tents and the medical tents that were previously buildable from the command tent are buildable from the engineer. And they can be built anywhere where you own territory now. So you don't have to overly rely on atlases to supply your outposts, to supply if you're doing a rapid advance, nothing's ever going to replace the utilization of the atlas. But because it's just able to keep moving, it's able to keep up with your troops. You don't have to worry about owning the territory. But our emphasis was on pushing, like diversifying the buildings that you have to use to kind of get back into the action. So some of these buildings have purpose and gameplay, but at the same time making it easier to play the game and I guess I could say trying to push more of the idea of building outposts. So that's the idea of removing the build radius restrictions on the command tent is now you can build those MO out depots and those medical depots anywhere in the territory that you own. So now people ideally will be more likely to build more small bases and resupply caches along their territory. So that way they can just restock and come back in. They don't have to go all the way back to their barracks. They don't have to go all the way back and drop an ammo box or bring up their atlas and maybe it might be doing something else. And maybe they don't have the population to build an atlas. So now they can just drop an ammo tent that the engineer can build. Bob's your uncle. You're good to go. Let's see, what else did we make a change for? The radio operator was switched to be buildable from the command tents instead of the barracks. We're going to be removing this next either today or Monday. We're going to be making the change to basically make it to where the civilian hold and those civilian administration structures no longer have a radial circle. So when you place down a civilian administration structure, it will just allow you to place the euthanization tents, the civilian the actual civilian holding area and the cages anywhere within that province that you've placed down the administration structure. Because previously you were restricted to a tiny little circle, and that circle was kind of useless and restricting in gameplay. So the central structure that you place down will act as a I guess you could say you can have policies towards civilians that come to that zone. So think of it as how you manage the civilians in that zone. You'll go to that civilian hold structure that you build anywhere in the province, and then you can place those 3 substructures anywhere now within that province. So every zone will have to have a civilian administration center to basically be able to facilitate building the 3 support structures. That was a big change that we saw that was needed to kind of make it easier to work with civilians and to make it less controlling in terms of basically because I saw screenshots of sometimes Shaggy and a couple other people were building 10 of those structures just so they can actually have and house the amount of civilians that they want to and to be able to have the cages, to be able to have the euthanization stuff, it was just impossible. Um, Naturally, adding in that change will tie in directly with the automation for like being able to automate intake for zones based off of what that zone, what your population that you can take guardianship over will allow, and then we'll tie those systems in so that way like people that get evacuated can go through that process of intake, or they can go straight to the carrier. So those are all things that we're looking at to basically like give you guys more tactical choices of how you want to handle your relief evacuation camps. Or if you're not evacuating people or you're just sheltering them for money, you can do that. It's whatever you want to do. Just giving the players more choices to play the game, but at the same time giving more purpose to the structures that are basically like across the board. Because we did a study, we looked at Command & Conquer 0 Hour, we looked at other games, and we noticed that there were a lot of buildings that you build them, you never come back to them. You never use them. And then the comms tent, the bounty system, that was disabled for the time being because it was causing a lot of player frustration. Nobody knew what it was for. The UI was broken for the comms tower. I think it's been broken for months. So that's a structure that we're going to come back to. I'm still debating if I want to include that into the core or just relegate it to like update in the future after factions, because I don't think anyone's even aware there was a bounty system in the game. And that it was even there. It was kind of working because there'd be random infected that you would kill, and they'd give you like $5,000, $10,000, and probably no one really ever picked up on it because the interaction with the UI to track those bounties and give you a location, and then set up mini boss fights we never really were able to kind of deliver on that full idea. So that's a system that we're going to come back to. And then I mentioned this briefly, but the DNA, we're going to be looking at the DNA. So we're going to open up for questions in about 5 minutes. I just want to finish this last thing. Is the DNA is part of the core. So we're going to actually be adding like a progression track. So you can't just go to shredder rounds immediately. Shredder rounds will be removed from the command center. We're going to add another little bar next to doctrines. That's going to be basically like your research for DNA points. And you'll have to hunt down and kill each lieutenant to get their DNA to unlock shredder rounds is one of the prerequisites. And then the other aspect of the tree is going to be like, okay, we're going to make the virus an actual threat. Because historically, the virus has been an afterthought. Like, when you go into, like, those gas towers, they don't do anything to your units. That's part of the core. So we'll go back and we'll add the gas mask. And we'll add the little oxygen timer. So when you go into a contagion zone, you got 10 minutes. You got 6 minutes. And then you can upgrade the capacity of how long you can be in those gas zones. Obviously, the scientist will have the highest number amongst everyone because he has a closed circuit unit. But everyone else will have those little respirators or their basic gear. And the idea will be is that'll be part of the DNA research tree. Well, it'll be like if you get hit by someone, less chance of being infected. If you are infected, it takes longer to spread within your system. And then eventually you get to the point of having a cure, where basically like you don't have to kill civilians on site anymore that are infected. And you can actually cure them as part of the intake process. But that'll be like a DNA research tree of essentially just, okay, what makes logical sense. Kind of looking, if you pull a parallel, I'd say Plague Inc. And in our mind, we've kind of put these systems off for so long. They just need to be done. They need to be good to go. And then at that point, co-op, and then we'll do factions. And we'll get back to factions. So the civilians will kind of be your pseudo fill-in factions. We'll obviously keep polishing them, keep improving them, because we're going to include them as part of the core now. It's like 1.2. Everything 1.2 and like past is going to just be by like a microscope. It's going to be put under it of what can we do to make it better and just easier to play the game, so it's not overwhelming at times. Because a good thing to give you guys an example, something that's like undesirable or kind of like unyieldly is how you handle turning on evacuation for a zone. It's like most people can't even figure out. You have to go to like the unit card, and then you got to toggle that on. And then you gotta go to the helipad, and then you gotta turn those manually on. It's kind of weird, it's clunky. So that will most likely end up being relegated to the civilian like structure, where like you'll set up your evacuations in a zone by going to that like civilian administration zone that you build in each zone, and you'll be like, okay, these are the rules for this zone. This is an evacuation zone, so any helipad that's here, immediately start evacuating. And then you turn on the individual helipads instead of having to do it on the unit card for the province. So there'll be like a logical progression in terms of how all these buildings kind of connect and build the whole overall picture of how you're going to like handle this crisis. Um, and then I mentioned the boat evacuations, and then we're still working on a way station. Our way station is going to be basically like the civilians will go and automatically garrison, and you can build them next to helipads, and they'll populate those. So that way you don't have to worry about a lot of visual clutter all over your base, where it's like they'll go in areas you don't want them to. So that way you can build like a little caged off zone where like when people are waiting, they're in this caged area, and then when the helicopter is ready, they leave that caged area and they go to the helicopter. So then that way it's better for security. Because once we start to turn up the systems and once we enable the DNA research, you're going to have serious problems in terms of basically one guy is in the group, he turns infected, he starts killing people inside of your contagion zone, and you're like, oh, we need to send in the guards, we need to send in the CERC, we need to like kill everyone because we don't want to risk if other people got infected because he could have been a carrier. But then if you have that's an example of the screening technology that's been passive, because we've given those little scanners. We've given the scientist scanners. That's going to become part of the DNA research tree. So it'll be like one of the first things that you unlock as a progression track to understanding the virus. So it'll be like that mobile scanner, it'll be the civilian scanner, and then you'll want to start planning for around your base's construction. I need to have these scanners. So then that way if there is a contagion, which hasn't happened historically, in your bases, in terms of the civilians that you're trying to evacuate or shelter, you'll know immediately. Or you're like, I can't risk it. I'm going to have to just burn everything. And just firebomb all of them, throw some grenades in there, kill all the civilians, because you don't know if you're going to evacuate civilians back to your carrier. Because we'll add in a progress where it's like, if you keep evacuating civilians to your carrier, the carrier will be scuttled. Because then we're going to simulate the carrier gets overran. And then you can't evacuate anymore. And then there goes another revenue stream. So the idea is that you figure at that point the military will lose confidence in your ability to scan and screen people because you're not doing a good enough job. So they're just like, fuck it. No one can leave the island anymore. Deal with it, basically. So that will be kind of the direction we're going into for polishing up in 1.3 for the core. And part of it will be obviously in 1.2 to finish up 1.2 for everything we originally said we were going to do. Am I missing anything, Chris or Derivar?
Not that I know of. I think you've covered just about everything that we really discussed about.
Okay, Chris, is there anything else you want to add to that? Any of that?
No, that's a lot.
Okay, so sorry, excuse me, so sorry. So now we're gonna open it up for questions. Now, don't ask questions about bugs. If you have a bug, post it on the forums, post it on the reports channel on here for the forums, like our actual forums or our forums, and try and keep your questions more on the topics that I covered. Please don't ask that many questions on factions, because now factions are going to be Q3, Q4, and Q2, we're ending Q2. Q3 is going to be polish, co-op. Q4 is going to be factions at this point. So it's going to be, so hold off any questions for factions and just focus on the co-op, focus on all the topics that I basically hit upon. So that way we don't get too ahead of ourselves, because a lot of the faction stuff is still being formulated and we're waiting for final models and we're still working on all that. Okay, Derivar, it's all yours.
Okie dokie. Delta 0, so with this new roadmap change, what's your pessimistic ETA for co-op?
I love pessimistic ETAs. So I'm going to estimate, I'm going to say it's going to probably take us 2 weeks. It'll probably take us a month and a half to finish polishing up everything that needs to be polished up and then get the game to a point where co-op is feasible. Because you figure, when we get the first build of co-op going, you will know almost immediately. Because we're going to ping it. We're going to have beta opt-ins. It'll be on the experimental branch, and everybody and their mama is going to want to get into it. So you'll know pretty much for the first day or two once we have a first playable build. It'll probably be desynchronization and bugs here and there, but anyone that's willing to basically like live on the bleeding edge will be able to help us track down those bugs quicker in every situation, and then help us get it out there sooner. And it's going to be 4-player co-op, just so people are aware, for asking questions in the future. And it'll be like the new Stellaris mod that they're pushing mode, where it's like everyone plays as CERC, and you divvy up and you share resources, and the player zero is the game master. They can either make it to where it's freeform and everyone has access to everything, or they can restrict it. In terms of like you get this much money, you get that much population, and so on and so forth. So Stellaris co-op mod / Halo Wars 2, and everyone plays as CERC in this first co-op push. Back to you, Derivar.
Okay. Ice Money, they ask, can we perhaps see a button on the transport atlas that will allow us to attract and garrison civs in the vehicle? We can go into uncontrolled areas, press the evac attract option, and unload them at an evac heli pad boat location. Would add a lot of utility to transport vehicles.
So the biggest thing is we want to avoid having people have direct control of the civilian mobs, because then they could be exploited. There was some talk of having car evacuations, so that way you could transport people from grid to grid. Let me get back to you on that. I'm not really sure about that one because the complexity of doing the car pathfinding is that our compromise was just to mob them up, send them over, and there's a lot of redundancy systems in place to make sure they don't kill themselves. So I don't have an answer for that just yet, but that is a good idea. All right, Derivar.
1 second, I was a little distracted by typing. Hang on, Xander raised his hand. Let us speak. There we go.
All right, Xander, you have the floor.
Hey, first I want to say thank you for combining two of my favorite genres, RTS and zombies. I don't see anything like it. So thank you for doing that first. My question was on the topic of the gas. I'm happy that this is getting reintroduced, but I was thinking about in a perfect world where factions and everything work as intended, no glitches, assuming. Do you think that's going to increase the infection rate, or is there an intention to make the civilian populace more infected when we reintroduce the gas?
The gas
that's gonna make it too infectious, because I mean people already get infected pretty decently. But if you introduce a new mechanic, I'm worried as someone who tries to evacuate as many people as possible in the game, like it might make it might spread way too fast.
So it's kind of like, I'm going to draw a comparison to State of Decay 2. So State of Decay 2 just released an update, and they basically have it to where they build these things called like siege towers, where they start sending out hordes to your base. So it's the same thing for the gas tower, where like once it's starting to be built, it would notify, or like that's why you like in my mind the AI are gonna kind of know what's around them, and they'll be able to send out scouts and kind of figure it out, so they'll know to attack it because it's going to threaten their livelihood. When it comes to CERC, it's the same thing, is that we might have to slow down their build time, because like the gas towers have always been like kind of weird in terms of how they were implemented. They would just screw your units up and nobody ever went inside them. Because they would just tick away at your infection level.
For that back then.
Yeah, but like when it comes down to it, it needs to be pushed in a way where like if you allow them to come up, then you've just gave them a foothold. That's their first step. If they're having like they're having issues securing that zone, or they just want to like lock down a zone and add another layer of protection, they might put one of those up. It'll start building, and then it'll be like a super defense structure, I guess you could say. So at that point, you want to hit it before it's built, or you want to hit it afterwards by having gas masks. Now, because gas masks are so common, at least in America as well, we can make the argument that some of the civilian groups will be able to adapt, get gas masks, start to hit them, and if they're not able to target them during or after. Because that would be a system where, like, after we implement the gas, we do playtesting, and we're like, okay, how does this affect the survivability of civilians? Because we want to maintain a certain minimum in terms of percentage of how often civilian groups die. We don't want to give them too much power, because we still want to have them as an environmental storytelling piece, where it's like, you come through a zone, everyone's dead, all the fences are torn open, and you're like, what happened here? Kind of like The Walking Dead, per se, like when they come across all those camps and they're just trying to figure out what happened and what they can scavenge from there. Kind of the same thing here, where like we do want the infected and other factions that get over on each other. It's just figuring out the balance in terms of like how often it happens and making sure that when it gets to a certain level of like gas towers become more prevalent in the world, that they start to basically tech into basically like, oh, from their supply, they're going to start either manufacturing or simulate that they're using it to buy or trade for gas mass. And then so that way, like theoretically, if you have a lot of money and you want to ensure the survivability of a faction or civilian group, you could just send them a crap ton of money, and then based off of their AI, they'll build a lot of outposts, they'll build a stronghold, they'll keep expanding, and then that way you two can build a partnership and build them close to each other. And then at that point, if we go in a tangible direction, like they use the supply, because right now we're thinking about using the supply so they get better weapons, but we're also at that point we'd have to consider gas mass, where it's like if they have a surplus amount of that, you'll start seeing their units with gas mass in the field. So then that way it's like, oh, when they do know they're going into one of these zones, they'll put that on, they'll go out there, do whatever they're going to do, whether it's either just trying to get supplies there or they're actually going on an attack mission to try and hurt the infected or hurt someone else, and you just have to go through that zone to hurt. Because the AI, you don't know what they're doing. Like, each one can do something stupid, they can do something intelligent. That's why we kind of roll different personalities, then we just kind of throw them in there in a sandbox scenario. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, man. I'm super excited for what's coming forward. I love this game. It's like my guilty pleasure.
Nice to hear.
I appreciate all the work you guys do.
Well, we're working really, really hard to deliver on everything you guys are looking for. All right, thank you. All right, Derivar, all you.
Right, a familiar stranger asks, speaking of DNA research being redone, will shredder rounds once researched change the muzzle flash of weapons or sounds for a small level of rule of cool? Example, flamethrower turning green now being a biocide weapon or something. That sounds cool.
Chris, what do you think?
Wait, say that again?
You're saying that basically when they get shredder rounds, how should we affect the characteristics of the weapons to show that shredder rounds are now being used, or some form of shredder rounds are being used for flamethrowers and bullets, or should we relegate them to the same effects?
No, there should be some kind of like, especially in terms of like the tracer round, something that indicates you're firing a shredder round.
Well, the problem is that for people that consider it, once we get that upgrade, it becomes a passive for everyone. So everyone's weapons will now always by default shoot shredder rounds, unless we make it to where they only use shredder rounds on Chelsea, because then you figure then that way there's still a deviation of like, because they don't need to use shredder rounds on anyone else, because it's only targeted to basically stop her ability to regenerate. So will we go in that direction, or will we go the direction of essentially making it to where it's just everyone now?
You don't know. Like I said, it's changing colors would be weird. Right now, I just let it keep it the way it is. We'll come back to it later and see if there's like maybe like some kind of clip change to the weapons.
Okay.
I mean, the ideal of visually indicating that you have it is definitely good. Like I said, maybe the tracer round is like an easier way to get around. You add a different color to the tracer. But long-term wise, yeah, if there's a visual indication that you have shredder rounds, then that would be cool.
Well, because you figure if we ever get to the point of implementing versus, it would be a balance consideration, because then people would know, or the infected would know if a player is playing as them if we ever get to that point of being like, oh, that person is shredder rounds, I should probably keep Chelsea away from them.
Or focus attack on that particular player's character.
To say, yeah. I don't know. We'll have to regroup on, but it is a good idea. We're going to put that on the wish list for right now. All right, Derivar, next one.
Yep. So, Ask Money again asks question. So now that we will be getting HVT targets on the infected, will we see HVT civs like evac execute this person or group? Maybe you get a cash bonus for evacuating the governor. Maybe a scientist will give you more DNA. This would obviously give us side missions that, if we choose to complete will give us an advantage. Could also encourage to stray away from the early game turtling that most people do.
So when it comes to like, are you talking more along the lines of bounties, or are you talking about more of like people that have to be evacuated? Just so I can clarify.
I'm not quite sure. Bounties.
So bounties right now is disabled because the system's mostly broken and works in a limited capacity. We're going to revisit it. I have to kind of debate if there's enough demand because no one even knows it really exists. I want it if we do implement bounties, it needs to be done in a way where it's more like the Red Dead system, where it's like you have a randomly rotated list of bounties from all the civilian groups, from all the infected, and then in the future the factions, and then that way it'll help you gain reputation with some groups, and it will also allow you to earn quick money. So sometimes it'll be like a special infected boss that has higher health, that has a limited guard with him, and basically you have to go and kill him, kill his guard, and then basically by killing him you get a little bit of money, a little bit extra DNA. And then for the civilians, it'd be basically like you go and you kill someone that someone else doesn't like. They like you for it, and you get reputation with them, but then you also get a cash bonus. So that'd be the kind of the idea we're going for. I just don't know if that's necessary in terms of the core, because you figure ultimately not that many people even knew that system was in the game. Now, if there's enough demand for it, people are like, yeah, we do want you to bring back the bounty in that way, include it into the core before you do co-op. It's something I'll seriously consider. It's just, I guess you start a poll if you want on the forums, or start it in the channel, or one of the channels and ask like, hey, like, what do you guys think about this? Like, do you guys think they should focus this? Or I can start a straw poll and post it in the channel sometime and see if there's how many people actually use the bounty and would they want us to focus that in the core. I'm just on the fence because it's such a big system. We might want to save it for just after factions, so that when we implement it, we can make it as another, or just put it in at the same time as factions, so that way we can implement it as a system that works with everyone. The infected, obviously the infected will always hate you, but you'll kill them for DNA and money to get back into the game, early game or mid game or late game if you screwed up and lost a lot of people and you're broke, or for the civilians and the factions for being able to get in good graces with them if you've screwed them over, or you just want extra rep and you feel like making a little bit more money at the same time. But I definitely will take that into consideration what you guys are saying. Next one, Derivar.
Yep. Do we have anyone with their hand raised? We do, Mr. Jackson.
All right, Jackson, floor is all yours.
Okay, so earlier you were talking about like different effects for if you have shredder rounds. In a game of mine, I managed to get shredder rounds and then just absolutely bulldoze Chelsea with artillery. I was gonna wonder if you were planning on doing something with that, because it seemed a bit unfair that I just bullied her from a distance.
Yeah, because the shredder rounds applies to everyone's damage. So that's something that. Okay, so that I feel like that's going to be included when we look at the AI and we're tweaking the lieutenants, we're tweaking Chelsea, and we're tweaking the infected and their special. I think that's going to be included in there because I'll give you an example. We put in the helicopter jump because people would just strafe Chelsea and just destroy her, and it made the game too easy. But like we need to go a step further, and we need to look at like games like Resident Evil, like Prototype, and take attributes or abilities that they have from those games. Where like if a tank shoots at Chelsea, there's a chance she's just gonna step out of the way of the shell. You know, it basically like that kind of stuff where it's like she can actually dodge and get out of the way of some things, and her AI will detect, oh, there's airstrikes coming, or there's a mortar coming. I should probably jump on top of that building and run away. So then that way it becomes more of a cat and mouse.
That makes sense. I was just wondering because when I hit her with the artillery, it took like 3 shots and she died immediately.
And that's also a balance thing because you figure like I don't think that she has that much of a damage resistance to artillery, so she probably just gets shredded when you hit her because like artillery just destroys everything. So it's like that might also come down to we might have to just make it to where only projectile weapons that you like the guns can hurt her. And maybe everything else just does like a general damage that can wound her, but the only thing that can actually kill her is a bullet. So you can bring her health down, but she'll still heal. But like to finish the job, you still like have to wound her to a certain percent, and then kill her with an actual like gun, like an AR or a shotgun or a pistol. And then that way that could also help balance that, because like yeah, you're making her weaker, like a boss from like Wesker or whatever, where you have to like make him really weak, and then you gotta hit him with like the special RPG that's like it has like that lead that like the special tip to it. It's like the red one from Resident Evil 5. But that's a silly example, but you see what I mean, where it's like you have to kind of like use a combination of things if you don't want to like go all in with ground units, because then you can just send in vehicles, weaken her, get her lower health, and then send in a ground team with a second wave to basically finish the job because they all have shudder rounds. So that could be a logical progression that we go towards to kind of improve it. So that way we get a. Cause I think that's the best way, honestly, at this point, is go in that direction, and then essentially, make it to where everything else is wounds her, but you can't kill her until you use something with a gun. So I'm gonna write that down. It's something for us to sneak in and update in the next couple of weeks and see how people like it on experimental. Only guns, ground. Oh, firearms. I'll call them firearms. Only firearms can kill Chelsea with shredder rounds. Okay, so that's a cool idea. I'm gonna regroup on that. Anything else? Did I answer your question?
That does answer my question. Thank you.
Alrighty. Alright, Derivar, we got 9 minutes.
Okie dokie. Michael asked you in the podcast question saying shredder rounds currently apply to everything, so that's why explosives deal so much damage after you unlock it.
Oh, yeah, that's what I figured. But if we made it to where you have to whittle them down to like a certain percentage of health, and then shredder rounds only takes it past that point, so you get her down to 5 to 10%, and then the only thing that can actually like kill her, or maybe we just make, because like, no, that wouldn't work. We'd have to make it to where we have to play with it, because you figure if you kill her, if you wound her right now with a traditional weapon, she goes into a cocoon. Once you get shredder round, she stops going into that cocoon. We permanently disable the cocoon, and we put her to stage 2 of her development. Her model just doesn't change because we haven't had the budget to get the Kerrigan looking model done. So let me again, you guys, we'll come up with something. That's gonna be included in 1.3 as a core system. Is we're gonna have to figure out something in terms of like making that, because that is a huge balance thing. That's part of the core of like we need to make the game harder but also fair. Anyway, next one. We're running out of time, Derivar.
Okay, so I Ice Money asks again. Question: Can we have mortars gas attacks that slow her or stop her healing?
So biological weapons, basically.
Yeah.
Let me think about that. I don't have an answer for that yet. I gotta talk to Chris. Chris is the lore guy, so he would know what we would do, and we have to come up with to basically like get something like that situated. Because what's gonna happen is all the stuff that we designed for Pandemic will probably end up coming over at one time or another to the story. So we're trying to like the campaign mode that we do. So we're trying to like make sure whatever we do can be directly transferred over, so you can be like, oh, I've done that in Pandemic, but now they're repurposing it in campaign of like this mission or this thing that's using this one aspect of gameplay. So cool. Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll come back to that one. Next one, Derivar.
Okie dokie. Any more questions in podcast questions? Not that I can see. So
People have three people have their hands up.
Yeah. So Red Rose has their hands up. I'll bring them in.
Hi.
Hello.
I had a question. Speaking of shredder rounds of specialized ammunition, would there ever for artillery be like deep penetrator rounds to deal with Greg?
I haven't thought about that.
We have talked about that briefly. I mentioned.
Maybe I forgot about it. Sorry.
Yeah, we need like bunker busters at one point. We want to add more, call-in support, more specialized munitions. But it's definitely on our wish list at this point.
We could try including it in the doctrine, because you figure when we do the doctrine tree, we want to be done. Like, we want to just make it feature complete so it accommodates all play styles, and it's just there's no more back and forth. So when we like the next couple weeks are gonna be just like finishing up 1.2 and then going straight into that list I mentioned previously. Okay. And it's gonna be on our docket where we're gonna look at, okay, what should we include in the core that's going to give players enough tools and bells to play with, and then at the same time should we consider doing like a DLC in the future when we leave early access, like a biological warfare's like deal, like like where basically it adds on a bunch of new like doctrine abilities and like things that are like you can use the virus to your advantage. That's something we thought about doing long term to basically like help monetize the game, but it's just something we're still playing with internally because we first want to make sure the game is like feature complete, full, and then look at like how can we maybe add DLCs in the future after everything's done to just kind of like keep adding on new content, but also still be able to like, what's the word? Support development.
To work on it.
Yeah, support the work on it essentially. So we don't put ourselves into a hole making everything for free, and then once we sold the copies to everyone, we go bankrupt because we can't afford to do any new content. So yeah. Anyhow,
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, we have 5 more minutes to Ivar.
Okay, so I'll read off Arc 151's question, then we'll take the 2 hands.
Excellent.
Okay, so Arc 151 asks, what's going to make the game a bit more harder?
In 1.3,
We were just talking about that too.
we were just talking about that. We talked about that for like an hour or two yesterday. So we were looking at a lot of reviews. We were looking on Steam, looking on Discord, all that fun stuff. And the biggest conclusions that we came down to was like kind of the points I hit on earlier. It's ultimately going to be the AI for Chelsea, the infected, and all of them. Because they can be really, really stupid when it comes to like how they attack, how they defend, how they choose when to send some types of units in. We need to improve who, like the AI director or the person that is basically calling the shots for Chelsea's army. So then that way there's more of a cohesion. So like for instance, let's say for instance they keep hitting one point and they keep failing. Everyone they send keeps dying. Find a new point to come at you from. Stop sending people to your walls that are just going to die. And basically either go to a new location or try syncing up 2 to 3 attacks at the same base from different directions. So know when to cut and run, basically, and regroup. And then know when to split up your units. So, like, let's say, for instance, you have CERC and they're in the city. They would know, please, for the love of God, don't send everyone coming in from one way. Break them up. Send them down this intersection. Send them down that intersection. Send some down. So basically a 3-way attack. You're in the center. You're dead. Unless you have really good unit control. So then that way they actually use their numbers to make your units panic and have to look around, shoot that way, and then shoot that way, and then shoot this way, and then the Juggernaut's coming that way. So now you have to retreat. But what if they come from behind you? So in those kind of cases where it's like more like tense, more desperate. So like, because right now they don't really use their numbers against you to kind of like, they need to play for time in some situations where it's like, sure, you killed a couple that were scouting. It's kind of like the forest. They were kind of trying to figure out where you're going. They're trying to figure out where you're building. They give you some free kills. They put down some AI markers to figure out, like, oh, if we went this way and went that way and then set the Juggernaut this way, he's dead. Like that kind of tactics. Tactics that a player would employ, basically. I mean, I'm sure it'll never get to the total amount of a player, but something to give the players more challenge. And then a part of that is lieutenants, focusing a good amount of time, like a minimum, hopefully a week, to basically be able to get them to where like each one plays distinctly different. Each one has like bodyguards that are assigned to them. Each one properly takes domainship or like ownership of a province. So this area is owned by that lieutenant, that area is owned by this lieutenant. Chelsea's the queen, so she's in the center, and actually show those icons. So you know when we introduce the DNA research, go to that zone and hunt down the turned SWAT commander from Pierce's faction to get that DNA research tree to kill Chelsea. Go to that zone to hunt down the Fenrir operative, the punk rock girl that was undercover. I think she's in the book. I don't think she's in the book. To basically like kill her to get one of the other ports. And then the third one, which is I think the Black Doctor, go and kill him to basically go and get the third piece. Then go hunt down Chelsea in her home province. That's kind of the direction that we're pushing towards in 1.3, where it's like, at each one kind of. Oh well, close enough. But like you figure, because it's the swap operative, and then it's the Fenrir operative,
And the doctor.
and then it's the doctor.
No.
Close enough. Yeah, he's a writer, so he's gonna gripe me every time if I don't say exactly the correct term. So, Essentially, something along those lines, and that will add some progression, much needed progression, and some much needed like actual tactics employed of like how you're going to hunt these people down and kill them and understand the virus, and then the DNA research tree, upping the virus so it's an actual threat. That'll all come round table to make them act the game incredibly hard, to where it's like you're going to have a lot of situations where you just die because they outsmart you. That's the direction we're trying to go into, whereas like they're a lot more intelligent. What's another example? And then obviously improving the bird AI a little bit more, and improving the Leviathan AI, so they're a little bit more intelligent in terms of like, oh, like maybe I should break off from building tunnels and go break that and go and break their defense, basically. But that's why we've added those tools to be able to detect them and track them and whatnot. So yeah, those are all things that would kind of push the difficulty quite a bit more back into the infected side to screw you up tremendously. All right, next one.
All right, so
last one. Pick a hard one. Pick a hard one.
Well, we got 2 hands up, so I'm just gonna take them.
Okay, Rochambeau.
Okay, Goldmaker.
I'm sorry, my one is pretty short. So basically, my concern here is that I feel like a lot of the weapons in this game are like unbalanced. Like for example, the I forget what it's called. You know the like heavy machine gun thing you can put on top of like the Humvees or the APCs and stuff. I forget what they're called.
I know what you're talking about.
Like, yeah, I feel like that like when I'm looking at the damage stats and the RPM, I feel like it's very underpowered, right? Like in comparison to like the weapons you can give assaults. Like you can give an assault like an M16. Like it should do I just feel like a lot of the weapons in the game either do too much damage or they do too little damage. Like when it comes like to the LMGs that you can give heavies and stuff. Like it just, I don't know. I feel like they don't do enough damage a lot of the time.
Couple points for that. So I know that the damage for the LMGs were lowered intentionally because of bullet penetration. The LMGs and the sniper rifles have a tremendously high amount of chance of going through and hitting up to like 8 people. So the idea is that when it was higher and closer to like its real world value of like how much it would actually destroy someone, it was a showstopper. Like literally, it was just too overpowered. So our compromise was to lower the damage, keep the penetration high, and have it to where those guns are more of like support, and you kind of have to have some kind of like a team with them to kind of watch the angles and also clean up what they miss. Because also those guns have a limited cone, so they can't fire directly on people that are meleeing them. But if they're spaced out enough, they can help each other out. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah. Well, what about the vehicle? Like, especially when it comes like to the EPC machine gun you can put on top. I just feel like it does so little damage for like
the striker one.
Yeah, the striker machine gun. Last I checked, it only does like 50 damage and like 10 RPM, I think, if I remember correctly. I don't know, something like that.
I'll mention that to Michael, because he's the one that does the balancing. I think he's in here listening. So he'll take a look at that. And basically just let me write down your name. Goldmaker. Okay, so we'll message you and maybe we can get some more information about that, because you figure I'm not sure, because I've never really noticed myself that issue with the strikers, because I don't use strikers by themselves. I typically use a lot of combinations of units, but I need to see how you're using them. I need to see what the exact values are that you're saying are too low. And then we'll go and test it, and then that one will DM you and be like, like maybe we're wrong, maybe we're right, but we won't know until like I see exactly your use case.
Yeah, I mean, I get why the the LMGs, the heavies can't be too they can't do too much damage, right? Because if that was the case, you wouldn't ever buy assaults. You just buy all heavies because the machine guns for them just do more damage.
Exactly.
But when it comes to like the strikers and like the heavy machine guns that you put on like the Humvees and stuff, I just feel like they don't do enough damage for like a vehicle, Anyways,
I'll double check
that.
Thank
you for your time.
Oh no, you're fine. Because the other aspect to consider is I think the caliber is different between the Ajax machine gun and the Striker machine gun. So I need to double check that to see if it's a different gun. I think one's 5 and one's 7. So I'll double check that, and maybe we did something wrong. Maybe we fudged the number, and we'll triple check it and go back to you.
Okay, yeah. I just feel like it should do a lot more damage. Yeah.
I dig it. All right, Derivar, one more.
Okie dokie. So Fenrir, I can't read the rest of that name. Sorry. But you're up.
Fenrir enthusiast, but yes, hello.
Hello.
Question. I have artists I hold in a shed. Can I have them make Fenrir concept art, even if it doesn't get used? Just bounce that back and forth until I find something nice.
Artists in a shed that you kidnapped?
Let's move past that part and get back to the question.
What the hell?
No, jokes aside, it's just a friend of mine that does art. Right? They're the one that made the Humvee one from way back when.
Oh, I mean, yeah, DM me. And maybe we can work out some kind of thing with just paying them a little bit here and there. Like, to just do commissions for us.
Oh, I'll cover the costs. You guys are paying enough, I imagine, right now trying to get that Phase 2 model anyways, so it's not like I should be screwing you over even further, spending-wise.
Still DM me and we'll figure out something. Because then that way I can send you some of the ideas that we had for some of the promo art, the reference art we were thinking of, and then maybe, we'll talk. When it gets there. Okay, that doesn't count as a question though. Did you have a question? Can I pull someone else?
With co-op coming around here soon, how far out would you say PvP aspect is going to be from co-op? Will it come after factions or be a sort of later end part of co-op?
I have no idea. I don't even want to give an estimate. Because I can figure, I need to see how co-op feels. Because we might have to make some limits for co-op because it's online, it's multiplayer. We can't just do everything infinitely because of network and everyone has different speeds. So we got to figure out where that lands, figure out how well it plays, and then from there, the next logical step would be to get the rest of the gameplay in there, and then we'll regroup. I would say somewhere around the time we do the campaign is when we'd probably consider revisiting versus. Because even when we implement factions, the other factions, like the Fenrir won't be playable and the Infected won't be playable until probably the same time around the campaign. So, yeah, I would hold off on that one for versus just yet.
Alright, that makes sense. I'm just asking since a lot of my friends right now have been waiting around for co-op, so the news that next month is the co-op beta testing kind of thing has gotten a lot of questions rolling on that front.
Well, let's keep in mind it might bleed over a little bit because we want to do as much cleanup as possible, but co-op is next on the agenda no matter which way you spin it. It's going to be cleaning up everything on that list, and then it's co-op time. And we're not going to stop until co-op's playable. All right.
That is wonderful to hear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one more. I swear it's the last one, Derivar.
Okay, let's see if there's anything in text. Nope. Okay.
Alright, Mr. Jason's last one.
Yep.
So, I was going to say this on the first time I was on, but I forgot.
Sure.
So, currently on my current playthrough, I have Chelsea just chilling at my front wall getting gunned down over and over. I haven't turned around yet. Are you guys planning on adding like something to make her run away after she gets down to a certain number of times? Because she's currently just hugging my wall, getting gunned down by like 6 MGs.
Yeah, she's not catching on. Can you give me that save file, by the way?
I could, yeah.
I need the save file because, like, you figure if there are instances like that, because what we're gonna announce when we're working on the AI, and if people are finding really, really stupid things that they're doing, we're gonna encourage people to just drown us in save files so we can look at their AI logic and figure out why they're not saying I should leave. Because odds are it's somewhere that they're screwing up. But yeah, that's gonna be part of the AI. And then in the next month or so, we're gonna be like focusing some time to basically just let's clean up the AI. And let's make them not that stupid, where they're idiotic, where they're suicidal, basically.
Yeah, she's just sitting there, and I've downed her at least 20 times now.
Yeah, that's fun. Okay, well, thank you for your question. All right, Derivar, wrap it up.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for asking your questions and sticking by and listening. If you'd like to continue to support Cepheus Protocol, we do have a merch and a Patreon. The link should be somewhere here in the Discord. I'm not quite sure.
FAQ channel.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to Robert and Chris for coming along and talking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
We'll have another one next month. See you guys next time.